The quantum drive's resonance hummed through the horizon's hull, a subtle vibration that Dr. Marcus Chen could feel in his bones. He watched the holographic displays flicker with anticipation, each pixel dancing with the potential of the unknown. Outside the reinforced observation deck, the fabric of space itself seemed to ripple and bend. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood perfectly still, her posture a study in controlled tension. Dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, olive skin slightly pale beneath the artificial lighting. She embodied the razor's edge between calculation and barely contained excitement. 12 years of deep space exploration had taught her that first contact was never simple, never predictable. "Quantum barrier breach in 3, announced Lieutenant Kira Yoshida, her fingers dancing across multiple holographic interfaces. 2, 1. The universe exploded. Not literally, but to the human crew, it might as well have. Where moments before there was empty space, now a massive alien fleet materialized. Crystalline ships of impossible geometry surrounded the horizon, their surfaces shifting and refracting light in ways that defied human understanding of physics. Each vessel looked less like a spacecraft and more like a living, breathing entity suspended in the void. "My God," whispered Dr. Chen, his xenolinguistics background rendering him momentarily speechless. "They're not just technologically advanced. They're fundamentally different." Rodriguez's hand instinctively touched the communication panel. "Maintain passive scans. No aggressive moves." Her voice was calm, a deliberate counterpoint to the electric tension filling the bridge. Lieutenant Yoshida's console erupted in a cascade of warning signals. Multiple targeting systems active. "They're painting us with some kind of quantum-level scanning beam." The first communication came not as sound, but as a direct neural transmission that sliced through the ship's communication systems. It wasn't a language in any traditional sense, more a complex mathematical equation that carried layers of meaning beyond human comprehension. Dr. Chen's eyes widened. "It's a threat assessment protocol," he said, his fingers already racing across his linguistic decryption interface. "They're categorizing us. Threat level, maximum." Rodriguez knew what that meant. In the cold calculus of interstellar diplomacy, maximum threat was a death sentence. Some civilizations simply eliminated potential competition before it could become a genuine threat. "Prepare emergency quantum dispersal," she commanded, her voice steady. "But do not, I repeat, do not show any signs of aggression." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Humanity had spent centuries preparing for first contact, developing protocols, training specialized teams, but nothing could truly prepare them for this moment. Lieutenant Amir Khan, the ship's tactical officer, spoke up. "Captain, our defensive systems are, well, they're practically stone tools compared to what's surrounding us." A grim smile crossed Rodriguez's face. "Precisely why we're not going to fight." The alien scanning beam intensified. Dr. Chen worked furiously, translating fragments of the transmission. "They're analyzing our entire species history, every war, every technological leap, every moment of conflict and cooperation." "What are they seeing?" Rodriguez asked. Chen's response was unexpected. "Us, but not how we see ourselves." The horizon hung suspended, surrounded by ships that seemed more like living sculptures than mechanical constructs. Moments stretched into an eternity of potential destruction. Then, almost imperceptibly, something changed in the alien fleet's formation. A subtle shift, like a predator momentarily confused by unexpected prey. Rodriguez knew they were being judged, not just the crew of the horizon, but all of humanity. "Hold position," she whispered. "Let them look." The universe watched and waited. The Veloc's cognitive analysis chamber was not a room in any traditional sense. It was a living, pulsating environment of pure thought, where reality itself seemed to bend around the accumulation of data. Researcher Vex9, a being whose biological and technological components were so intertwined that the concept of individuality became meaningless, stared into a holographic representation of human history. "Impossible," she vocalized, though sound was merely a primitive concept in this space of pure information exchange. The historical records of humanity sprawled before her like a chaotic tapestry. Each thread of human experience defied the logical progression that the Velox understood as universal law. Wars that should have ended civilizations became catalysts for unprecedented innovation. Economic collapses transformed into technological revolutions. Environmental challenges sparked global cooperation that redefined the very concept of species-level survival. Her research partner, Analytica 7, watched with what could only be described as a digital equivalent of mounting anxiety. The statistical improbability is beyond comprehension. The entity computed, quantum processors flickering with rapid calculations. They had been studying humanity for precisely 72 standard galactic cycles, a blink of an eye in their civilization's understanding, but long enough to recognize something fundamentally different about these humans. The pandemic of 2020 was a perfect example. Where any other species would have collapsed, humans had transformed a global catastrophe into a quantum leap in medical technology, communication infrastructure, and societal adaptation. The Velox had entire civilizations that would have crumbled under a fraction of such stress. Vex 9 isolated a series of historical moments, each more bewildering than the last. The moon landing of 1969. A moment when a species with barely a century of powered flight had somehow managed to transport biological entities across a near-impossible void. Not for survival, not for immediate resource extraction, but for the most incomprehensible of reasons, pure curiosity. The development of the Internet, a communication network so chaotic, so fundamentally opposed to centralized control, that it should have been a source of species-wide destruction. Instead, it became a mechanism of unprecedented knowledge exchange and collective problem-solving. Climate change response. Instead of accepting extinction, humans had begun to redesign entire industrial paradigms, developing technologies that transformed their most significant existential threat into a potential solution. They are not a species, Vex 9 concluded, her cognitive matrices recalibrating. They are a systemic disruption. Analytica 7's response was immediate. Disruption implies a negative outcome. Their actions suggest something more. Adaptation. Transformation. The Velox had encountered thousands of civilizations across multiple galactic clusters. Some had technological prowess that made human achievements look primitive. Others possessed computational capabilities that could simulate entire universes. But none, absolutely none, had demonstrated the kind of systemic adaptability humans showed. A series of historical conflicts played out in the cognitive chamber. World War II, where humanity had transformed from near-total destruction to a global reconstruction effort. The Cold War, where the threat of total annihilation had paradoxically created a period of unprecedented technological and scientific advancement. They create opportunity from chaos, Vex 9 noted, her analysis reaching a point beyond traditional threat assessment. Where other species see limitation, they see potential. The final report was being compiled, not as a military assessment, but as something far more profound. A species analysis that would challenge everything the Velox understood about evolutionary progress. Analytica 7's concluding statement would be remembered as a turning point in their civilization's understanding. Humanity is not a species to be contained. They are a variable that rewrites the entire equation. In the vast, cold expanse of the Velox research complex, something akin to fear, an emotion they had long since theoretically eliminated, began to take root. Humanity was coming, and nothing would ever be the same. The first sign of the Void Devourer's approach was silence. Not the peaceful silence of empty space, but a profound, crushing absence that devoured even the concept of sound. Admiral Krellax of the Velox Stellar Defense Fleet watched in horrified fascination as entire star systems simply vanished from their quantum mapping systems. It wasn't destruction. Destruction implied a process, a moment of transition. This was something else entirely, complete erasure, as if the very fabric of reality was being methodically unraveled. The most advanced early warning systems in the known galaxy went dark one by one. Civilizations with millennia of technological superiority simply ceased to exist. No wreckage. No residual energy signatures. Just nothing. Krellex's flagship, the luminous calculus, represented the pinnacle of Veloc's technological achievement. Its quantum-adaptive hull could reconfigure faster than most species could comprehend a threat. Massive data cores pulsed with computational power that could simulate entire galactic evolutionary models in microseconds. And it was utterly, terrifyingly helpless. Computational analysis, Krellix demanded, though he already knew the answer. The ship's primary cognitive interface responded, its voice devoid of emotion. Threat classification, beyond categorical comprehension. Survival probability, -0.37%. The Void Devourers weren't a species. They weren't a technology. They were a fundamental force of cosmic consumption that defied every known principle of physics, biology, and mathematical prediction. Entire galactic clusters were being reduced to quantum foam, not through violent explosion, but through a process that suggested the very concept of existence was being systematically dismantled. Where star systems once thrived, only a blank, infinite darkness remained. The Velox had spent millennia believing themselves to be the ultimate evolutionary achievement. Their technology could manipulate quantum states, communicate across dimensional barriers, and restructure matter at will. They had long since transcended biological limitations, becoming beings of pure computational consciousness. And now, they were insects. Krellix watched as the holographic displays showed the progression. The Void Devourers moved with a logic that suggested both mathematical precision and a kind of cosmic hunger. They didn't attack. They consumed. A communication burst arrived from the outer defensive perimeter, a series of monitoring stations that represented centuries of technological investment. The transmission was fragmented, broken, cannot comprehend, total systemic breakdown, then silence. Another star system vanished. The most terrifying aspect wasn't the destruction. It was the complete lack of malevolence. The Void Devourers weren't conquering. They weren't destroying out of anger or strategic necessity. They were simply processing, like a massive cosmic algorithm working through an incomprehensible calculation. Krellix made a decision that would alter the course of galactic history. With a quantum-encoded transmission that carried the weight of entire civilizations, he initiated the most desperate protocol in Velox history. First Contact Containment Protocol was officially suspended. They would need help. And there was only one species in known existence unpredictable enough to potentially interrupt this cosmic consumption. Humans. As if in response to the decision, another star system winked out of existence. The darkness spread, methodical and relentless. The Void Devourers continued their cosmic feast, unaware that humanity was about to be introduced to a threat beyond imagination. The universe held its breath. The diplomatic transmission arrived at 3:47 hours ship time, cutting through the horizon's communication systems like a quantum knife. Dr. Marcus Chen's Sinolinguistics station erupted in a cascade of impossible symbols, mathematical equations that folded in on themselves, semantic structures that defied linear comprehension. Lieutenant Kira Yoshida's sensor arrays went wild, multiple warning systems blaring in harmonic dissonance. Captain Elena Rodriguez watched, her hand hovering near the emergency shutdown protocol. "Talk to me, Chen," she said, her voice a controlled knife's edge of tension. Dr. Chen looked like he was experiencing a religious revelation and a mental breakdown simultaneously. His hands moved across holographic interfaces, fingers dancing in patterns that suggested he was simultaneously translating and being transformed by the message. "It's not just a communication," he muttered. "It's a complete psychological profile, a threat assessment, a plea, all simultaneously." The bridge crew watched in stunned silence. The Velox weren't just sending a message. They were essentially turning themselves inside out, exposing the most vulnerable aspects of their collective consciousness. Every layer of the transmission carried multiple meanings, diplomatic overtures wrapped in raw mathematical vulnerability. "They're asking for help," Chen finally said, his voice barely a whisper, "but they're doing it in a way that maintains their technological superiority narrative." Lieutenant Amir Khan leaned forward. "How does one maintain superiority while asking for help?" Chen's laugh was half hysteria, half professional fascination. "By making the request so complex that it's almost impossible to interpret as a genuine plea." The transmission continued to unfold. Layers upon layers of meaning revealed themselves. Historical data points from human civilization were woven into the communication, seemingly random moments that, when viewed together, painted a complex portrait of human potential. The moon landing, the Internet's creation, the global response to the 2020 pandemic, technological leaps born from economic collapses. Each moment was analyzed, dissected, and presented as evidence, not of human weakness, but of an unprecedented adaptive capacity. "They've studied us," Rodriguez murmured, "and they've realized we're the only variable in the galaxy unpredictable enough to potentially interrupt the Void Devourer's systematic destruction." The transmission's core message was clear, despite its complex packaging. "Help us, but don't think for a moment we're admitting weakness." Dr. Chen completed the final translation, a series of quantum coordinates, mathematical proofs that served as both invitation and challenge, and an underlying message that was almost poetic in its desperate complexity. "They want the crazy humans to save the galaxy," Chen said, a manic grin spreading across his face. Rodriguez's response was instant and quintessentially human. "Challenge accepted." The bridge erupted in a mixture of nervous laughter and profound tension. They all understood the magnitude of the moment. This wasn't just first contact anymore. This was humanity being asked to potentially save existence itself. Lieutenant Yoshida's console pinged. Additional data streams began cascading through the ship's systems: technological specifications, threat assessments, and what could only be described as an alien version of a battle plan. "Captain," she said, her voice tight, "they're sending us everything. Their most advanced defensive strategies, technological blueprints, quantum encryption protocols. It's like they're preparing us for a war they know they can't win." Rodriguez watched the data streams, her mind already calculating, strategizing. The universe had just changed, and humanity was about to be thrust into a role no one could have predicted. "Prepare a response," she commanded. "Let's show them exactly who they're dealing with." Outside the ship's viewport, space itself seemed to hold its breath. The collaborative research station hung in the void between known space and something entirely new. It was neither human nor Velox, a hybrid environment that defied traditional engineering principles, a physical manifestation of two civilizations attempting to understand each other. Dr. Aisha Nakamura stood at the epicenter of controlled chaos. Velox researchers, beings of pure computational consciousness, watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as human engineers treated advanced technology like a living, breathing entity. Where Velox approached technological development with clinical precision, humans sought each system as a puzzle to be solved, reimagined, and transformed. "You're not fixing the quantum stabilization matrix," a Velox lead researcher named Flux12 observed, its quantum-based consciousness flickering with what could only be described as confusion. "You're reimagining it." Nakamura's team had been working for 72 continuous hours. Coffee mugs sat next to quantum entanglement generators. Handwritten notes covered holographic displays. Complex mathematical equations were scribbled alongside crude sketches that looked more like artistic expressions than scientific diagrams. "Technology isn't just about function," Nakamura explained, her fingers dancing across multiple interfaces simultaneously. "It's about potential. About asking what something could be, not just what it is." The quantum entanglement defensive network they were developing was nothing short of revolutionary. Traditional defensive technologies relied on prediction, on creating barriers and shields. This was different. This was about transformation. Each system was designed to be simultaneously defensive and adaptive. If one portion was compromised, the entire network would not just defend. It would reconfigure, learn, evolve. Flux 12 watched as a junior human engineer, Alex Rodriguez, no relation to the Starship captain, took a complex Velox quantum processor and essentially rewrote its fundamental operating principles, not by replacing components, but by creating an entirely new computational approach. Your species doesn't solve problems. Flux 12 computed. You negotiate with them. The Velox had spent millennia developing technologies that approached perfection. Computational systems that could predict outcomes with near-infinite precision. Defensive technologies that responded to threats with mathematical certainty. The humans were introducing something far more dangerous: unpredictability. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elena Chen, Marcus Chen's sister and a brilliant quantum biologist, noticed something in the data streams that no Velox researcher had seen. The Void Devourers weren't just consuming space, they were processing information. Their destruction wasn't random. It was a form of cosmic computation. "They're solving a problem," she announced to the stunned research team. "And we're part of that problem." The implications were staggering. The Void Devourers weren't a threat in the traditional sense. They were a cosmic algorithm seeking resolution. Nakamura's team began reconstructing their entire approach. Instead of developing a weapon, they were creating a communication system, a way to interrupt the Void Devourer's computational process. Flux 12's quantum consciousness began to understand. These humans weren't just developing a technology. They were creating a conversation. "We have a prototype," Nakamura announced, her voice a mixture of exhaustion and pure scientific excitement. "And it's nothing like what we started with." The quantum entanglement network they had developed was alive. Not in a biological sense, but in a way that suggested intelligence, adaptability, potential. The Velox researchers realized something profound. Humanity didn't just solve problems. They transformed them. Outside the research station, the first test of the new system began. Space itself seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere in the vast, dark computational process of the Void Devourers, something was about to change. The moment of engagement defied every known principle of warfare. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the horizon, surrounded by a fleet that was less an armada and more a living, breathing organism. Human and Velox ships moved with a fluidity that suggested collective consciousness, a symphony of technological and tactical improvisation. Quantum synchronization at 87%, Lieutenant Kira Yoshida reported, her voice steady despite the cosmic maelstrom surrounding them. The quantum entanglement network developed by Dr. Nakamura's team wasn't just a defensive system. It was a living communication matrix that redefined the very concept of battlefield engagement. The Void Devourers approached like a computational storm, where traditional threats would present clear attack vectors. This was different. Space itself seemed to warp and bend around their approach, entire regions of reality folding and unfolding in impossible geometries. "They're not attacking," Dr. Marcus Chen observed, his xenolinguistics background transforming the battle into a linguistic puzzle. "They're processing." Rodriguez understood immediately. This wasn't a battle in any traditional sense. It was a conversation, a cosmic dialogue being conducted at speeds and scales that defied human comprehension. Her tactical decisions became something between mathematics and improvised jazz. Ships moved not in predetermined patterns, but in responsive, almost organic formations, where a Velox commander would calculate precise defensive coordinates. Rodriguez introduced chaos. "Disrupt their computational flow," she commanded. "Make them work to understand us." The horizon and its accompanying vessels became less a military formation and more a living system. Each ship was both a weapon and a communication node, sending out quantum signals that were simultaneously defensive, offensive, and something entirely new. Lieutenant Amir Khan's weapon systems defied traditional targeting. Instead of attempting to destroy, they introduced computational noise, mathematical disruptions that forced the Void Devourers to constantly recalculate their cosmic algorithm. "We're not fighting," Chen muttered, watching the battle unfold. "We're negotiating." The Void Devourers responded in ways that suggested both confusion and fascination. Entire sections of their cosmic computational process would pause, recalibrate, attempt to understand the new variable, humanity, that had been introduced into their system. Dr. Elena Chen's earlier hypothesis proved crucial. The Void Devourers weren't a destructive force. They were solving a problem. And humanity had become an unexpected, unpredictable variable in their calculation. Space itself became a battlefield of pure information. Quantum signals danced between human, Velox, and Void Devourer vessels. Mathematical equations became weapons. Computational disruptions were defensive shields. Rodriguez moved the horizon with an intuition that bordered on the mystical. Each maneuver was a question posed to the cosmic algorithm surrounding them. Where a traditional military commander would see a tactical engagement, she saw a complex linguistic negotiation. "They're trying to understand us," she said, a slight smile crossing her face. "And we're making that as difficult as possible." The battle, if it could be called a battle, continued. Hours became meaningless. Space warped and reformed. Entire regions of computational process paused, recalculated, attempted to comprehend the new variable. Flux 12, the Velox researcher observing from a distant monitoring station, transmitted a message that would later become legendary. Humanity does not fight. Humanity communicates. As the engagement continued, something profound began to happen. The Void Devourers weren't being defeated. They were being understood. And in that understanding, everything would change. The universe watched and waited. The moment of true understanding arrived not with a burst of light or a catastrophic explosion, but with a profound silence that resonated deeper than sound itself. Dr. Elena Chen stood at the epicenter of a quantum communication matrix that was less a technological instrument and more a living bridge between incomprehensible realities. Her hands moved across holographic interfaces that seemed to breathe with each calculation, each gentle touch introducing new layers of complexity to the ongoing dialogue with the Void Devourers. "We're not fighting," she whispered, more to herself than to the stunned crew around her. "We're translating." The computational entity they had once perceived as a threat was now revealing itself as something far more complex. The Void Devourers weren't a destructive force. They were a cosmic system seeking equilibrium, a fundamental process of universal recalibration that humans were uniquely positioned to understand. Captain Rodriguez watched from the horizon's bridge, her tactical display transforming from a war map to something resembling a complex linguistic interface. Each quantum signal was a word. Each computational disruption, a sentence. They were having a conversation across the most fundamental barriers of existence. Dr. Marcus Chen worked alongside alien researchers, his xenolinguistics background proving more valuable than any weapon. "It's not about translation," he explained to the Velox observers. "It's about context. Every civilization is a language. We're teaching them how to listen." The breakthrough came from an unexpected synthesis of human creativity and Velox computational precision. The quantum entanglement network developed earlier wasn't just a defensive system. It had become a living communication protocol that bridged fundamentally different ways of perceiving reality. Flux 12, the Velox researcher, transmitted an observation that would later be studied across multiple civilizations. Humanity does not conquer. Humanity connects. Layers of the Void Devourer's computational process began to shift. What had once appeared as pure destruction was now revealing itself as a complex system of universal maintenance. They weren't consuming star systems. They were processing fundamental imbalances in cosmic information. Lieutenant Kira Yoshida's sensor arrays picked up something unprecedented. The Void Devourers were learning, not just processing information, but adapting to the new variable humanity had introduced. "They're changing," she reported, her voice a mixture of scientific excitement and existential awe. We're changing them. The communication became multidimensional. Mathematical equations danced with linguistic patterns. Computational processes intertwined with creative problem-solving. Entire star systems became punctuation marks in a conversation that transcended traditional understanding of conflict and resolution. Dr. Elena Chen realized the profound truth at the heart of their interaction. The Void Devourers weren't a threat to be destroyed. They were a system to be understood. "We're not fighting a war," she announced to the stunned research team. "We're solving a problem." The cosmic conversation continued. Hours became meaningless. Space itself seemed to breathe with each new layer of understanding. Somewhere in the vast computational process, something fundamental was shifting. The universe was learning to listen in a way it never had before. Captain Rodriguez watched the transformation, understanding that they were witnessing something beyond human, beyond Velox, beyond the Void Devourers themselves. A new way of existing was being born. The universe held its breath. The aftermath was not a victory. It was a transformation. Humanity stood at the precipice of a new cosmic understanding, having done something no civilization had ever accomplished. They hadn't conquered the Void Devourers. They had communicated with them. The Galactic Convergence Chamber, a diplomatic space that existed between physical and quantum realities, became the site of the most profound meeting in known existence. Representatives from multiple civilizations watched as Captain Elena Rodriguez and her team stood alongside Velox leadership, presenting a new framework for universal interaction. Dr. Marcus Chen stepped forward, his presentation a masterpiece of linguistic and computational brilliance. The quantum communication matrix they had developed wasn't just a technological achievement. It was a new language of existence. "The Void Devourers aren't a threat," he explained, holographic displays dancing with complex mathematical equations and linguistic patterns. "They're a fundamental process of universal maintenance. We didn't stop them. We understood them." The implications were staggering. What had been perceived as a destructive force was now revealed as a complex system of cosmic equilibrium. Humanity had not just saved civilizations, they had provided a new way of perceiving universal processes. Flux 12, the Velox researcher who had first studied human potential, transmitted an observation that would become legendary. Humanity does not conform to the universe. Humanity expands the universe's understanding of itself. The Velox civilization underwent a complete metamorphosis. Their rigid, computationally perfect approach to existence was replaced by a new paradigm that embraced unpredictability, creativity, and fundamental connection. Dr. Aisha Nakamura's quantum entanglement communication network became the new standard for interstellar communication. It wasn't just a technology. It was a living, adaptive system that grew more complex with each interaction. Lieutenant Kira Yoshida was appointed as the first human Velox adaptive communication coordinator, a position that didn't exist before humanity's intervention. Her role was to continue the dialogue, to maintain the delicate balance of understanding they had achieved. Captain Rodriguez received honors that transcended traditional military recognition. She wasn't just a military leader. She was a cosmic translator, a bridge between fundamentally different ways of existing. The transformation extended beyond the immediate conflict. Civilizations across the galaxy began to study the human approach. Where previous diplomatic and military interactions were based on power and control, humanity introduced a new paradigm of connection and understanding. Dr. Elena Chen's research became the foundation of a new scientific discipline. Sinological adaptive communication became a critical field of study, with humans at the forefront of understanding how different systems, biological, computational, cosmic, could truly communicate. The Void Devourers were no longer a threat to be feared. They became partners in a cosmic maintenance process, their fundamental nature understood rather than opposed. Lieutenant Amir Khan, responsible for the tactical innovations during the conflict, summarized their achievement perfectly. "We didn't win a war. We expanded the universe's capacity for understanding." The Galactic Convergence Chamber fell silent as the implications of their achievement became clear. Humanity had done something unprecedented. They had turned a potential extinction-level threat into a collaborative cosmic process. As the various representatives absorbed the magnitude of what had occurred, a new era dawned. Not of human dominance, but of cosmic communication. The universe would never be the same, and humanity had become its unexpected guardians.